Hi, we're back again, Bonneyville Mill, and today we're going to start a breakfast here, and we're going to start with the biscuits. We're eventually going to end up with some biscuits and gravy, and we are going to use our spelt flour for these biscuits. The spelt flour is a real good all-purpose flour. It can also be used for bread as well. Spelt is an ancient grain. It's a very close cousin to wheat, and if you hold a spelt berry next to a wheat berry, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. It's got a little bit darker color to it, and they say that the gluten in the spelt is a lot easier for most people's digestive systems, and so that makes it better for people that are a little bit sensitive to the gluten. So we're going to use the spelt. We've also got here the other ingredients that we're going to need. We're going to need some milk. We're going to need some salt, some baking powder, and some butter. And I always use real butter in all of my recipes. So we're going to get the dry ingredients together. We will post the recipes so that you see the exact quantities needed for the salt, etc. And I'll get those ready, and then we'll start getting ready to roll these biscuits out and cut them. We now have our dry ingredients mixed together. Basically, we've got 2 cups of the spelt flour, half a teaspoon of salt, and a full tablespoon of the baking powder. What I did is I put those in the mixing bowl and I mixed them all up. And the way I do it, I take out about half of the dry ingredients into a separate container, because instead of cutting the shortening or the butter into your recipe, what I do is I actually grate it in there. And so you'll see what I do in just a minute. I did put the butter in the freezer to get it really nice and stiff, and we will go ahead and start to shred some of this in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shred a little bit until I get some in there. Okay, so if you get a little pile in there like that, then I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of that extra dry ingredients on top of there, and that's going to keep the butter from clumping up. So we're going to go ahead and continue and put the whole stick of butter into the recipe. Now I've shredded the entire stick of butter into the dry ingredients here, and like I showed before, as I would shred a little bit, I'd go ahead and cover that with a little bit of the extra dry ingredients that I had separated. That way it doesn't clump back up again, because you want that shortening or butter to kind of be evenly spread throughout the dry ingredients. So we're going to mix that up a little bit with my whisk, just so it's nice and separated. And this is what you want to see. So if you look closely, you see little chunks of butter that are kind of spread evenly throughout the dry ingredients. We're going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk and stir that in. I did switch from the whisk. Once I got the milk added in there, the whisk kind of clumped up in the middle, and I didn't think about that. So I switched to a spoon for stirring. And you'll find that if you use whole wheat or whole grain from Bonneyville Mill, that your absorption rate of your liquid is going to differ a little bit from store-bought products. I did end up putting in about a full cup of milk into the recipe to get the consistency that I wanted. So if you look in here at what we've got, it is kind of clumped together, but you don't want it too wet. You want it to be a little bit dry, because we're going to go ahead and roll this out, and we're going to cut the biscuits. So this is about the right consistency for it. At this point, you're going to want to flour your tabletop wherever you're going to cut them out. And go ahead and take your recipe at this point, maybe. And lay it out here. And sprinkle a little flour on top and just kind of work it down a little. I like to make my biscuits kind of thick, so you don't want to push it down too flat. And we're going to get a can to cut them with. If you have a biscuit cutter at home, you can use that. I'm just using this little can. I usually make my biscuits a little smaller. My wife says, we don't need that big of biscuits, so that's how I do it. I do find that when I had a can at home for many years, my can kept getting thrown in recycling time after time. So if you get yourself a biscuit cutter, they hopefully won't throw it away. So we're going to go ahead and cut some biscuits. I've got a tray here, and you do want to grease your pan. So put a little grease across the whole surface of the pan. And at this point, we're gonna start laying the biscuits on there. And there's one. There's two. We have all the biscuits cut, and they're ready to go in the oven. Have the oven preheating at 350 degrees. If you see the way that I laid mine out here, and this is personal preference. Some people like to put them all in there so they're all touching immediately. I always leave just a little bit of space in between each of these, because biscuits, if you know how they cook, they're going to grow a little when they're in the oven. So you leave a little space and they will grow together. But this will help them to cook more evenly if you put a little space between them. So we're going to go ahead and stick these in the oven and see how they turn out. Biscuits are in the oven. They're starting to cook, so we're going to start getting ready to make that gravy. And my method of gravy making may be a little bit unorthodox. You can make gravy however you've made it in the past, but what I do is I take the milk and I preheat that in the microwave. And the biggest reason that I do that is because I hate the constant stirring and the long time that you have to stand there at the stove. So if you get that milk preheated, not boiling, but at least kind of hot to the touch, you'll be able to put your finger in it and see that it is hot. And that way, once you mix it into the sausage, it will thicken very quickly, and it will not take long at all for it to be done. So again, make it any way you are used to doing. This is just the way I've done it for many years now. So we're going to go ahead and start to cook up the sausage. We got it in the pan here, and cutting that up and eventually get that crumbled into smaller pieces. So you can probably cut. All right, we're ready to start working on the gravy a little bit more. We've got the sausage in the pan and it's nice and browned up here. I've still got the heat on the sausage, and I did not extract any of the grease from the sausage. Now, if you really want to, you can do that. I think it adds to the flavor of the gravy if you just leave it in. It also depends on the quality of your sausage. Some has a lot more grease than others. So I've warmed my milk in the microwave, like I said. I'm going to go ahead and put in about 1/3 of a cup of just regular white flour and whisk that in. And then we're going to go ahead and dump straight into the skillet, into the hot sausage. until we've got about as much as is going to go in there. And we'll go ahead and stir that. And since the sausage was hot and the milk was hot going in, it should take a lot less time for this to go ahead and thicken up. Alright, the milk in the sausage, the flour and milk in the sausage is thickening now, and you can tell just by the way it looks, it's starting to get ready. So you want to continue to stir that as long as it's on the heat. Milk scorches very easily on the stove, so you don't want to let it sit on a stove and not stir it. So just go ahead and continue to stir that, and when it starts bubbling in the center a little bit, you'll know that it's about done. I kind of removed my heat there for a second. Used to working on a gas stove, and this is a little bit different the way it handles. So biscuits are done, I believe. So we'll go ahead and pull those out. And if you can see, they, like I said, all the gaps that I had left in between them have kind of filled in. The biscuits kind of grew together. Being that these are 100% pure spelt flour, that's whole wheat or whole grain flour, they will be a little bit dense. So you want to bear that in mind. There'll be a lot more filling than a regular white flour would be. All right, everything's done. We've got our biscuits here, so go ahead and grab a biscuit and split it in half. Nice and hot, right out of the oven. A little bit of the gravy. Pour that on top there. And then you didn't see it while I was cooking, but I did put in some seasoning, just some salt and pepper. And you're going to do that to your own taste. Some people can't have salt, and that's fine. So you want to season it the way you like it, and it's ready to eat.